Welcome to the 3 Life Lessons podcast, where I, Rob Hubbard, talk to renowned figures from learning and development to uncover the secrets to their success and find out what makes them tick. Remember to like, subscribe and follow to ensure that you never miss an episode. So my guest here today is one of those very rare people who is able to combine both academic rigour with pragmatism and real-world application. So we first met when we were introduced by a mutual connection of ours in one of our customers. And my guest's background in social and organisational psychology and also design thinking meant that we were really well aligned and our approaches kind of matched quite closely. And we got to work together on a really ambitious learning project. And in that project, I was impressed by my guest's curiosity. I think it's fair to describe you as a very curious person. And that curiosity is currently helping all of us in learning and development make sense of Gen AI in the context of learning. So welcome to 3 Life Lessons, Detlef Hold.
Thank you so much. For a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining me. So first question, as you know, so what's your current role and what's been your journey to get there, please?
Yeah. Thank you for calling me curious. I'm really flattered by that, but it's true that I'm driven by novelty, and so currently I'm leading capability building for diagnostics engineering, Roche Diagnostics Engineering. So I work with I think you had a background in engineering as well, if I remember correctly, Rob. Very interesting.
Yeah, many years ago.
So engineering, and what they do is they build buildings around the world and manufacturing sites and laboratories actually to produce new medicines for patients. Very interesting role, totally new, and I'm trying to build a system for them to enable them to really enhance their knowledge and skills related to project execution. Yeah, how did I get here?
Yeah.
It's funny, when you invited me to the podcast, I thought, what was actually my journey to where I am today? And I found 5 different moments in my life over the last 30 years. I've taken a few notes. I'm going to every now and then have a look. But basically, until 23, I looked back one day and I took notes and I thought, gosh, I've done 35 different jobs, like a lot of young people do. So I worked in production overnight, night shifts because it was well paid. Of course, I distributed newspapers like most young people. I was teaching a little bit, doing garbage. Being in back of the garbage trucks. It was an interesting experience because you meet different people, and that was good learning. And I worked in clinical trials at the time as well. Just when coding was not actually existing, it was all manual at the time. So there was 35 different jobs until 23. And then there was my moment when I was in the midst of studying psychology. And what was interesting for me to see is that I shifted from an initial focus on cognitive psychology, information processes and how we see and how we make sense of the world, and developmental psychology, how children grow up and how young people grow up and become responsible adults, well equipped for the world. I shifted to work in organizational psychology because, at least for me, that was a little bit more applied to where I thought I would find a way to maybe satisfy my curiosity. So I focused on work organizational psychology, and during the studies early on, what was interesting for me was looking at teams, looking at motivation, and also looking at sometimes you are not motivated because you're stressed, and so these topics combined with leadership and change was something that really inspired me. And I did my master's on sports psychology because I was into sports all my life, and I loved playing volleyball. Because I was a coach and I was part of a team, and I learned how to lose and how to win, and also the role I can play in this. I did my master's with the best 6 volleyball teams in Switzerland at the time.
Wow.
Video analysis 30 years ago. It's crazy. Took me forever, but it was very interesting insights. Yeah. So through that, I was able to work for Swiss Olympics. Was able to prepare the curlers, actually the curling team for the Olympics, and they didn't take me to the Olympics.
Oh, that's a shame.
And then out of that, I started teaching. So initially, because I had to make a living, but then because of the passion, I really enjoyed working with young people initially who do apprenticeships, and usually I had 2 hours advance of them because I wasn't trained as a teacher, but more as a psychologist.
Yeah.
So I had to learn a lot of new stuff quickly, and the teaching brought me then to adult learning. So I thought it's interesting to work with young people, but I also enjoy working on learning processes with people in changing environments. And so very early on in the 90s, I had the opportunity to work in the Swisscom, one of the first telecom privatizations. And as people were going public, all of a sudden they had to sell things. Before having been part of a public institution, all of a sudden it was about sales.
Yeah.
Very big change for them at the time.
Yeah.
And that brought me to South America because I was teaching and I had a bit of experience in consulting. One of my friends said, I know someone, and a week later I had a job in Ecuador.
Wow.
And and there actually I was responsible for a school department as a sports director. And of course I had some qualifications in sports, but my real focus was organization development, helping to change the whole foundation in the school related to it, make it better. So that was my time where teaching came together with being part of a school, and then I was teaching in academia for a year actually in South America. And people would say they could understand and speak English, but actually there were no materials. So I had to translate everything from Spanish into English at the time. And I was just learning the language myself. I didn't have time to take classes or so in Spanish at the time. With that experience, I came back early 2000, and I worked in a consultancy in Switzerland, which basically had two pillars. One was the consultancy where you go into organizations like UBS, Swiss Re, but also the train, the train institution in Switzerland. And we did a lot of analysis and build up programs for them and help to improve people development programs, for example, or leadership programs. And at the same time, we had qualifications for corporate learning, for leadership and for coaching at the time. So my pillar was corporate learning, and we would build up people from being a trainer to becoming a manager of a corporate environment in the area of learning. And I was in charge of that for 3 years, 3.5 years really, and then had the opportunity to decide actually be either going to the UN, where I would have worked in management development in Italy at the FAO. And that was fascinating. Because I think everyone is like, when you're in your early 30s, you think, wow, working at the UN is like amazing. And the other option was actually to go into an international organization. And so that's how I ended up working at Roche 20 years ago. And within Roche then, I counted recently, I had like 11 different roles in 20 years. A bit more managers, I think, at the same time, because there's constant changes as well of people moving on. And what's lovely about the time within Roche is that I'm very grateful for the fact that I had so much opportunities to see the affiliate perspective in a country, because I started in diabetes care in an HR department and learned to build up all the processes from scratch, from leadership development, talent management, skill building, change processes. There was so much going on because we were globalizing the affiliate at the time. And then the rest was really from 2007 on, I worked globally in either cross-functional roles or functional roles. So every 3 years, there was either me building up a new department or being part of a department which is at the interface of learning, knowledge management, and change. Yeah,
very good.
So just to finish, the 5 years in Switzerland was then 5 years at Genentech in the US. And I just wanted to mention that because, Rob, you were referring to design thinking. And the time in Silicon Valley as part of Roche, but another part of the company, has really deeply influenced my thinking and my approach as well. And I came back with that in 2019, had a few more roles in digital learning as part of a transformation program, and then most recently accepted this position. So it's been a journey with a lot of changes, some expected, some unexpected, but honestly, I loved it from beginning to end.
Yeah. and perhaps driven by curiosity as well. You know, somebody taking on so many different roles, it's because a kind of thirst to experience and learn new things has perhaps driven some of that.
It's a lovely statement. I remember this change program where we looked at different people for different faces. And
Right.
what I thoroughly enjoy is building up from scratch, where there's the unknown and there's some ambiguity and there's constant change, and that's okay. But then after 3-4 years, when it's about maintaining and sustaining, maybe other people are better at that.
Yeah.
So everyone has their qualities and what they enjoy, and for me it was always this new and fresh look at something that was very appealing.
Yeah, very good. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the life lessons that have come from that journey. You know, quite often I have guests and I ask them about their journey in L&D, and they sometimes use words like wiggly or a bit strange or a bit different, and I think that's one of the great strengths, I think, of us as a function. So Detlef, what is the first life lesson you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, that was a tough one. You know, what is a life lesson, and do I have something to share that could be helpful for others? When I thought about this, there's one thing I always followed in my entire career, and you were alluding to that. The academic rigor was something I always loved and found appealing. And what does science tell us? And what evidence does exist about things that we claim in L&D or we work on, or like the 70-20-10 model, for example? It's just one example of many. And the other was on the practical part of how we want and can learn in a corporate environment. Because it's not that you can sit in a classroom and you have all the time in the world. You don't. So where's the reality? And so one of the life lessons is really related to what I call, what reminds me of a statement that Levine shared a long time ago. Levine was one of the most social psychologists of the last century.
Right.
He said, there's nothing more practical than a theory. And you're smiling because I think it sounds like a paradox, but for me that's one of the life lessons really that I took on. Context matters. Being close to people's reality and understanding what might work in their environment. Not what we say in conferences or there's good exchange sometimes, but the reality and how that might work. But then also, what evidence do we have to sustain that idea, and then work on it and iterate. So that's one of the things. And so for learning, it was one of the critical things I was always paying attention to. Be it in sports, where you do a lot of training. This is, I think, where my love for training and practice and feedback and taking a step back and thinking about it and seeing what we know already, and then continue with the practice and the doing is something I thoroughly enjoy, and try to practice as well when I try to develop programs and systems for people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've seen a lot of people had great success in taking what they learn in sports psychology, and sometimes elite sports psychology as well, and putting that into a business context. And that, what you mentioned about, taking the time to actually understand the people and their situation and their needs and their wants and their preferences, rather than your preconceived ideas of what might work. And there is this thing as a designer, working on hundreds of different projects, all kinds of different, challenges. You have to remember that you have to stay humble, because you never know the situation or the context or the problem or the opportunity, as well as the people who are actually kind of, resting up against it on a daily basis. And, we've had, I know I've told you before, we've had so much success over the years of just asking the question, speaking to people, looking at the data as well, but really asking questions, parking your preconceived ideas and seeing what comes, and you can get some absolute diamonds, things that completely pivot the entire approach that you're taking, make it so much more effective. Yeah, very good.
I love the fact that you mentioned that, Rob, because it is something where we did connect because of your interest in evidence-based working and asking questions to confirm what the assumptions are that we might be having about a project manager out there taking care of a 50 million project, because I don't know. I haven't done that work, so the humbleness is something I found super helpful to work on continuously, to say, yeah, we have lots of ideas and concepts, but to really try to validate it, they're the right ones.
Yeah, yeah. And just that simple question, when you're doing user research, we always kind of finish that off in the interview. If you could have anything, if we could do anything to solve this problem for you, what would you have? And sometimes you just get these moments of genius from people because they know about the systems or the working processes or the approach or the culture or the technology that you don't, that you can't, and you won't ever know that level of detail, and you can get some absolute gems out of that. So that's a great one. So what would life lesson number 2 be then, Detlef?
Yeah, when you take this nugget of connecting what we try to systematically look at in models and theories and approaches, and then the practical work we're doing, in between is exactly what you said, which is this idea of the messages sometimes in the design. Because I think design is not just about content. There's a lot of focus on content, and I think we're trying to move away from it step by step. Sometimes just listening to people and asking questions can be the much better intervention than coming up with some kind of class or even a quick video that we're producing. It's not about producing all the time. It's helping people to solve problems. And so my second lesson is related to something that also comes from sports psychology, and that's the concept of flow. Again,
very good.
Because I used flow in my master's, and flow is related to motivation and being in the moment and going with the flow. And so when I think about this life lesson, for me, one of the things I love to use in career coaching or in conversations where people think about their development is Forrest Gump. I do think that life is like a chocolate box, and you never know what you're going to get. So the lessons for me was, the curiosity helps, but then it's about taking the risk. And many times we have opportunities in front of us where people talk to us and they give us a solution. But if that happens and they engage and they want to be part of a solution of a course on influencing or some skill building opportunity for project managers in our case, we need to grab them. So it's connecting the curiosity to be out there and finding out what's going on, but going along with the flow. So
I see.
I continuously try to pay attention to what happens in groups when I work with them, and that can be in work streams where we try to come up with a lessons learned process, or it can be in creating some course with users themselves. But the message is not just in what people say, but also what happens in the process. So I think paying attention, that's my phone, sorry. Paying attention to what happens in the process of and go along with it, and then feeling comfortable with the ambiguity is something that can teach you a huge amount about making the right choices about the solutions that we want to develop in learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. I remember attending a session hosted by IDEO, the design agency, who I just think are fantastic. But one of the things that they described was being able to, what's the right way to put it, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, in that kind of, there's lots of unknowns, things are ambiguous, you don't know what the right solution might be, and kind of immersing yourself in that information gathering and understanding the audience and that kind of period of unknown. They said basically the longer that you can kind of stew in that situation, in their experience, the better the solutions, which I thought was really interesting, because most people, when you're faced with uncertainty, your immediate instinct is to try and become more certain and step out to come up with the solution quite quickly. I'm terrible for that. I will always, give me a problem, I'll generate you 20 solutions in 5 minutes. But actually I thought it was fascinating, that thing about being comfortable with that ambiguity and allowing yourself to kind of soak in it, and then the better solutions come from that. Seeing those opportunities for flow, those things that you can take advantage of to help in your solution.
And this taking advantage of, I thought maybe I give you an example. The model behind it is Gestalt, like what emerges in the conversation can be actually part of the solution. Here's an example that I remember about 2 years ago. I worked on an innovation project with colleagues who work with me, but they're also patient Like all of us
Okay.
can be patients at one point in time.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was a very close relationship on the use of virtual reality to bring people closer to the reality of what happens for a patient the moment you actually have to live with a disease.
Mm.
And it was not just about the medical aspects of what people are experiencing. It was about their day-to-day organization. You know, maybe they have a dog at home, maybe they have kids, maybe everyone has a relationship. Depending on where you live, it can be a financial burden to be in that situation. And just by working with and through those people, and they themselves helping us to take the right decisions, was what really every one of us actually tried to pay a lot of attention to. I think that's what I mean by going with the flow and then reading what happens and working with that information for the design of our solutions.
Yeah.
I love that moment, and it was just very insightful experience at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So we're on to our final life lesson. What's the last one that you'd like to share?
The third one, I think the third one was related to change and transitions. And certainly that has to do with an individual's biography. In my case, I went to other countries because I was more interested to be exposed to other cultures and immerse myself into that reality than a promotion, for example. And that's why it happened, I think, because the opportunity came up, like Forrest Gump, and I grabbed the opportunity at the time, and that's why I ended up in the US.
Yeah.
Because it was the right moment in time. Now, change, I think, comes along with some cost. Sometimes it can be painful, it can be uncomfortable. Yeah. It's not nothing that's like, you know, we jump on, we say, yeah, let's change just because. But I do think there's a moment related to change that reminded me of something I learned in a coaching class I took many years ago. And that is that change happens when you become who you are. Change happens when you become who you are. And why that resonated with me so much is when you're exposed to change that might be imposed on you in an organization, or you choose to change yourself and you go in a different environment, or you have a change in your team, or you have a new manager, or you have a new task. Each time it's a transition moment. And a transition moment can be uncomfortable, and it is sometimes uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it can be an incredible opportunity to look at yourself, pause for a moment, think about what you enjoyed and what you would like to keep, and what maybe new things might emerge. And if you're comfortable with this ambiguity, in my case at least, that was always very helpful to keep that moment of transition as an opportunity to at least have a look at myself and then decide if I want to go along with the change, or if I say, rather not, this is too much or not the right moment.
Yeah.
Something I experienced in my professional life on the one hand, and I think as you did and as many people do, there's personal changes that you want to do, or some you have to do that happen to you, and the other is in organizations. There's constant changes. You might be in a new team and it just happens, and sometimes you say, I want to be in a new team. So those moments just can help to grow. And I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, I have my flaws like everyone, but I do always try to make an intentional effort to take those transitions and say, is there anything I can try at least do a little bit different next time?
Yeah.
And the last point maybe is what kept me healthy, and this is part of the advice maybe that helped me at least, is I said one day to myself, as changes happen sometimes to you, sometimes you do them, every third decision will be mine.
Okay.
And that kept me healthy in the sense of, you know, there's a change and here's another change, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But then it's important for every human, an individual, really to have the sense of control about what happens to you.
Yeah.
And this is why I came up with this idea for myself, which so far has worked very, very well.
Yeah. So to make sure that you always have that agency, because a lot of change that happens in life, particularly if you're employed, but you don't really have the control over that, the change is happening, it has to happen. But giving yourself back that agency, that okay, these two changes have occurred, but this third change, I make the choice, I choose.
It gives you like this little intentional push to pay attention and say, okay, how can I make that happen? Because change happens, that's okay, there's always reasons. But this small thing is just something that was good for hygiene, I think.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you, Detlef. 3 fantastic life lessons there. And it's just been wonderful to kind of get to know you a little bit better. And that's one of the things I love about this podcast is people that quite often I'm talking to people that I know pretty well in a work context or through speaking at conferences, but you don't often get to speak about this kind of stuff. And I find it absolutely fascinating. So I think there's loads that we can all learn from those life lessons. Thank you, Detlef Hold. You've been a brilliant guest.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it having me. Good luck with your podcast. It's a wonderful thing you do. And I appreciate that you invited me.
If you've enjoyed learning those 3 life lessons, then make sure that you like, subscribe and follow so that you never miss an episode.